I've said all along that of the cases out there right now, the one I'd be most concerned about if I were the former president is the Mar-a-Lago document case.
And why so?
Well, because it doesn't go a lot on intent or anything like that. It's very clear that he had no business having those documents.
Well, I think this original indictment was engineered to last 1,000 years, and now it will last. The superseding indictment will last to antiquity. I mean, this is such a tight case. The evidence is so overwhelming.
Such a tight case. The evidence is overwhelming, and yet, despite all that. Despite how overwhelming the evidence is, a trial date is nowhere in sight because of the judge. Trump appointee Judge Aileen Cannon slow walking this tight, overwhelming case to last the ages every step of the way. Today, a prime example of her snail-like pace. She held a hearing that just wrapped up for the day, entertaining a far-fetched motion filed by the defense. The motion questioned whether special counsel Jack Smith's appointment in and of itself is constitutional. That hearing continues Monday. It's not over yet, and will be followed with the Cannon hearing 2 more challenges brought by the defense. NBC News reports that at today's hearing, quote, Cannon appeared skeptical of some of the defense team's arguments. However, the fact that she had this hearing, that she took the time to hear these arguments, only adds to the now widespread perception that she's simply doing whatever she can do to delay the case for Trump, which is his legal strategy. If he wins re-election, he could then have this case thrown out. According to former Trump White House lawyer Ty Cobb, Cannon's decision on Smith's appointment could end up backfiring on her. Watch.
The worst thing that could happen to her is that she actually does rule for Trump on this, because that would go to the 11th Circuit. And then I think this, petty partisan prima donna would be put in her place and they would remove her.
That's where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Politico national correspondent, MSNBC contributor Betsy Woodruff Swan is back with us. Plus, former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy's here. And MSNBC columnist and contributor Charlie Sykes is here. So, Betsy, just remind everyone who Ty Cobb is in the Trump story. He's not a Democrat. He's not a liberal. He was Trump's lawyer. And his characterization of Judge Aileen Cannon is among the harshest I've heard.
That's right. Ty Cobb was the lawyer representing the White House during special counsel Robert Mueller's probe. He worked in the White House. He worked very closely with Trump. One of the key strategies that he supported, which ended up working out okay for Trump, in part because of Bill Barr's role, was pushing as much material as possible to the special counsel as quickly as possible. The argument that Cobb was making internally during the Mueller probe was that justice would be best served by moving quick, by not throwing up tons and tons of roadblocks, by not trying to slow down the investigation as it was unfolding. And Cobb, of course, had enough sway within the White House, in the president's inner circle, that was the argument that in many cases won the day. The way he handled the Mueller probe, of course, is the polar opposite, totally antithetical to the way Trump's current criminal defense team is handling special counsel Jack Smith's investigation. Of course, there's all sorts of differences between these two scenarios, but I think retrospectively, years down the road, when people look back and just ask tactically which lawyer did the best job for Trump at that moment in time, Ty Cobb is going to look pretty good from a strategic standpoint. The fact, of course, now that he's coming out so vociferously, so adamantly against Trump's behavior and Cannon's management of this case really speaks volumes.
Tim Heaphy, we shouldn't have to reach for Trump allies to verify what we can see with our own eyes, but I do. So I'll cop to that and I'll own that. But what's instructive is that Trump is a master at disorienting us with things we can see with our own eyes, right? Facts that aren't in dispute. And so Bill Barr is instructive in saying, yeah, I read that indictment and that what he took is not in dispute, that he took it is not in dispute, and that he obstructed in a very sort of bad cop movie kind of way, the government's effort to get back into its possession state secrets, national defense information, that was all caught on tape too. Talk to me about what a judge, any judge, Trump appointed or otherwise, could see so differently.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, Nicole, is a judge who is inexperienced, insecure, and therefore does not have the ability to sift valid arguments from completely ridiculous arguments. You know, I won't go as far as to say this is an intentional effort by the judge to help the man who appointed her, but it is the sign of a judge who does not have the kind of experience, the kind of instinct to sift what is meritorious from what is not. Judges are besieged in cases, actively litigated cases like this, with all manner of motions, of pleadings, some of which really matter and some of which don't. And 99% of the judges around this country have the ability to say, this one I can get rid of quickly on the papers. I don't need a 2-day argument to evaluate whether or not it is constitutional for the special counsel to be appointed, when judge after judge after judge who has litigated that issue, not just with respect to Jack Smith, but other special counsels, has found consistently that it is permissible for the department to use special counsel. What we're seeing here is a judge who had 4, I think, criminal trials since she was appointed. She did not have a long track record as a litigator even before she was appointed. And her instincts are poor, and they're forcing her to entertain these ridiculous arguments that really don't merit the time that they're spending. And the net result is delay, and justice deferred, justice delayed, really prejudicial for the special counsel, but also for the people of the United States who have a big decision to make.
Maybe I want to associate myself with your refusing to go that final step. But I struggle because incompetence should be blind, right? Incompetence should harm all sides equally. And the truth is, Judge Aileen Cannon's conduct has only harmed Jack Smith.
Yeah, absolutely right. No question. That's why so many people say, well, there must be some sort of nefarious motive here because her incompetence is favoring one side. There are a lot of cases that are the stakes are so high. You see this a lot in capital cases that judges bend over backwards to provide procedural due process and a thorough opportunity for the defendant when the stakes are so high to raise every possible argument, to err on the side of being completely fair. Again, I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt here on intention, but the net result is the same. The net result is, as you've said, Nicole, very, very beneficial to the former president. When he is staring at allegations, I agree with Ty Cobb, I agree with Bill Barr, there is a very, very strong evidence that we have seen already on the face of the indictment and in pleadings set forth by the special counsel. This case seems extremely strong. It does not rely, like the federal case in Washington, on any indication of the president's intent, but simply his possession of these documents and the allegations of obstruction on top of his possession of the documents after repeated requests. It seems really, really strong. So delaying the adjudication of that strong case, really prejudicial to the United States.
Charlie, let's go back to the strength of the evidence. Here's, what basically amounts to the crime being carried out on tape.
You did. This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to figure out
See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, it's so, we here and I have, and you probably almost didn't believe me, but now you believe me.
No, I believe
It's incredible, right?
No,
hey, bring some Cokes in, please.
So there he is, holding the gun. I know it's a gun. I know I can't shoot the gun, but hey, staffer, can I shoot it? I mean, basically on tape, carrying out all the elements of the crime.
Well, and you have the audio tape. You also have the videotape. And this is why it is so important to do what you did earlier, which is to say that this is not a partisan Democratic hit job. You know, when you have Bill Barr, when you have Ty Cobb talking about how solid the evidence in this case is, this is a very, very straightforward case. And, you know, Aileen Cannon has turned out to be who we thought she is. You know, I mean, I agree with Tim, but it is interesting that the nicest thing you can say about her, the strongest defense you can make is that she's incompetent. The strongest defense you could make is that she's an inexperienced judge in over her head and cannot make a decision, because the alternative to that is a judge who is so in the tank for Donald Trump that she's willing to, in many ways, embarrass the court. You know, and I know that you talked about this New York Times report earlier this week, which is extraordinary on so many levels. The report that the senior judges, you know, basically took her aside and said, Judge Cannon, probably you should not sit on this case. This is not a good idea. It is not. The optics are bad. There are alternatives. The fact that they thought that it was, you know, appropriate for them to urge her not to take the case is one thing. The fact that this story is actually out there, that it was reported, that there are judges who apparently have told this story, is also extraordinary and an indication of just how embarrassing her performance has been in this case, because you will very, very rarely read stories about what federal judges said to other federal judges. That is also not normal at all. And the other thing about Aileen Cannon that I think is striking and worth noting is what an outlier she has been in the federal judiciary, including among Trump-appointed judges, including among judges who are supported by the Federalist Society, who in fact have been going by the book, who have been standing by the rule of law, who have not been accepting these arguments, who have not dragged their feet, and in fact have been, you know, very, very outspoken about what Donald Trump and his supporters have done. So, you know, Aileen Cannon really is out there on an island, either because she is so inexperienced and incompetent, or because she is willing to trash her reputation to delay this case for Donald Trump. Either way, it's not a pretty picture.